There is a new story coming out about the FBI and the deep state. You're going to want to hear this before we bring on our guest to talk about it. I just want to remind you, go to rwatch.com, subscribe there, become a watchman. You know that we're bringing the truth into your life, and you know a story like this, the FBI and the deep state, you know that the social media outlets can't stand the things that we bring out. They're always trying to shut us down. The best way to make sure that you get live and good information is going to rwatch.com. Subscribe there, become a watchman. Also, if you like this video, please share it with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Make sure that they are in the know. All right, so getting to the story, we're going to invite on our guest right now, Mr. Reagan. Mr. Reagan, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on.
Yeah, glad to have you on. Where are you at right now?
I am in Stockholm, Sweden.
Stockholm, Sweden. All right. Well, we're going to talk about that, but we also want to talk about the story you have coming out about the FBI, the deep state. What's going on with that?
Well, a lot of times I feel like I'm in Middle Earth, and Sauron is winning, right? Like Mordor is creeping in everywhere, and there's just a few of us trying to fight back against it. And, I feel like there is this, evil that is encroaching on the world, and like fewer and fewer people are fighting against it. And it's really awful. And now you get this story about Joe Biden and the FBI, right? So apparently something like 40 confidential informants have come forward to the FBI with incriminating evidence against Joe Biden over the past several years, all the way back to his vice presidency. And they've done nothing about it. Not only have they not taken action to investigate this, taken action against Joe Biden, it seems as though the FBI has actively covered this up. And this is a much bigger story than I think people understand, because there's really only one reason that the FBI would do this, and I have other evidence to indicate this. But this is a video that I'm going to be putting out the next couple of days on my Mr. Reagan YouTube channel. But it indicates to me very clearly that the FBI has no interest in arresting or convicting of crimes people in high positions, especially the president, but rather they will blackmail presidents using this kind of evidence that they have of corruption. They will blackmail them, and they will use that evidence to control them. So it looks to me like the FBI is controlling Joe Biden.
Well, somebody certainly seems to be controlling him. We watch what he's doing. I mean, I don't know how anybody could not come to that conclusion. We're going to talk to us more about that as time goes by. We're going to hear your story on your channel. But what can you tell us? Can you give us a snippet? What can we anticipate to see?
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of what it boils down to. Like, at some point when Hillary Clinton was running for president against Donald Trump, a gentleman by the name of Patrick Byrne came out, and he told this story, right? This guy's a fairly prominent guy. You can look him up. And he explained this story. The FBI had approached him to gather evidence against Hillary Clinton. They believed that Hillary Clinton was taking bribes, that she was corrupt. So they set up a situation in which Patrick Byrne would introduce Hillary to a friend of his who had a lot of money, a foreign dignitary. This foreigner offers Hillary Clinton money. She takes the bribe. This is all recorded. Patrick Byrne then gives the evidence to the FBI. They say, thank you very much, and then they disappear. A little while later, he approaches the FBI on another situation that he was working with them on, and he said, what happened to the Hillary Clinton thing? Why hasn't she been arrested? They said, oh, no. We're going to install her as president in 2016, and then we will control her. The FBI will control her presidency. They just explicitly told him this. And he, of course, relayed this information in an interview. And I've posted that video multiple times on my channel, and I don't know why that doesn't have massive traction. That's another indication the FBI just wants to control the presidency. And why are they going after Trump so much, right? We used to think, well, they were investigating from Russian collusion, even though the Steele dossier is, of course, nonsense. Why? Well, maybe they want to gather evidence against him to derail his campaign to get Hillary in office. But they kept spying on him after he was president. Why? Well, maybe it wasn't to derail his campaign. Maybe they don't care who's president, as long as they got some dirt on them, as long as they can blackmail them, as long as they can control them. So these are the three instances in which I think it's pretty obvious they control Joe Biden. They had the ability to control Hillary Clinton. and they were trying to control Trump. And the one that they could never control was Donald Trump. That's why they hate him so much. That's why they're trying to stop him from ever being president ever again. We wonder what the deep state is. Is it Wall Street? Is it the military-industrial complex? Is it these activist billionaires? Is it these labor unions? Is it the special interest groups? Well, yeah, it's all of those things. But I think it's also the three-letter agencies. And it looks to me now, this kind of corroborates a lot of our theories that we've had for a long time. Probably the FBI has more control in the deep state than any other entity. They seem to be the ones running the show. And it's quite scary because it looks like they may be compromised by China. So if they're compromised by China and they control, and maybe, I don't know, I may be overstating the case, maybe understating the case. I don't know, because nobody will investigate this. But if China controls the FBI and if the FBI controls Joe Biden, then China is in charge of our government, essentially.
You know, you talk about fighting back against this kind of stuff, and you feel like there's fewer and fewer people fighting back against it. Why do you think that is?
You know, it just feels like it's becoming overwhelming. I feel like the number of people who are fighting against the American people seems to be ever growing. And the number of people who are fighting for the American people, I don't know if I'd say it's shrinking, but that doesn't seem to be growing so much. And it just feels like we're getting overwhelmed. And what's funny is, you know, I say that the FBI controls the presidency. They seem to control everything. Like, you know this as well as I do. When you're trying to get the truth out on social media, you're blocked by social media. Well, before Elon Musk took over, the Twitter was absolutely saturated with former FBI agents working at Twitter. And we know that CNN has hired a myriad of former intelligence officers. We know that MSNBC has done the same thing. It seems like the FBI not only controls the presidency, they control the entire media, and they control even social media. So it's very, very hard to fight back. We're fighting as hard as we can, and it just seems like we're screaming into the abyss, and it doesn't seem like anything we do is effective. But you know, that's the nature of being trying to fight for good. You just keep fighting no matter what, you know.
Right. You know, as obviously I bring a Christian pastor's perspective into all of this that's going on, and I look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It talks about a restraining force, and I believe that restraining force is the work of the Holy Spirit in and through the believer, in and through a Christian. And Christians, in my mind, need to be very engaged, very well informed, very active in fighting against the evils that are going on. And oftentimes we do this. You and I were talking earlier about this idea of separation of church and state, and why we see so many pastors not engaged, so many Christians not engaged. It's high time that Christians wake up and get engaged, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's so critical to at least be aware of what's going on, because like I'm in Stockholm right now. I'm in Sweden right now. And I've had a couple of debates with, lefties over here in Sweden. I try to avoid it because it's just an unpleasant situation. You know, this is what I do for a job. I don't want to do it in my social time, you know.
Right. But
the people that I have discussed it with, it's very sad, you know, because a lot of people here in Sweden, they're not just it's a very atheist, anti-Christian region of the world, especially Stockholm. I don't know about the rest of Sweden so much, but definitely Stockholm. And the people that I've spoken to, they're not just dismissive of the concept of a God or Christianity. They're really hateful. And I mean viciously hateful. They basically will say, if you believe in the Christian God, you're an idiot. They'll just say that openly. And I said, you would never say that to a Muslim. If you saw some Muslim being berated for being, for his faith of Islam, you would stop that person and say, don't berate him like that. What kind of a bigot are you? But a Christian, you'll just tell them to your face, you're an idiot for believing in God. And they're like, oh, it's different. And I'm like, no. It's absolutely the same thing. You just don't realize that you have been conditioned to believe that that's an acceptable view. And I talked to one girl who said that in schools, they teach them that there is no historical figure that is Jesus Christ, that was like made up, an amalgamation of maybe several different people over time. And I said, I'm pretty sure most historians that I've read about believe that Christ was a real figure in history. And she said, well, that's not what we're taught in school. And she says, but, a lot of times they will take liberties with what they teach. They'll teach different theories. Maybe it's not in the mainstream. And I said, well, would they teach, for instance, that black people are inferior to white people? And she said, no, of course not. That would be terrible. That would be, racism. And I said, well, this is essentially the same thing. They're teaching something that is not the typical, thing that historians believe.
Right.
But they're teaching it because they have a hatred of Christianity. That's exactly the same thing. And they don't realize that they have been conditioned to be hateful bigots. But that's what they've become in this society. And I can tell that a lot of them are very lonely. They're very depressed. They have no purpose in life. And some people have even told me that not only themselves, but other people they know feel very isolated, very alone, and have no purpose in life. And I think, there's a pretty easy fix for this. It's called faith, know. But, and many studies show that if you do not have faith, you are much more likely to be depressed. You're much more likely to commit suicide and self-harm, be self-destructive, and for some reason, and I think it may go all the way back to like communism. There is this idea that if you have faith in God and if you have a duty to God, well, then you do not have a duty to the state, and the state wants you to have the ultimate loyalty to them.
Oh, without a doubt. You can see this. I mean, this is what's happening in America right now. People not many people have opened their eyes to the cultural Marxist takeover of our country. And that's exactly what's happened. They're trying to replace God with the state. And they want families to depend on the state. They want children to depend on the state. They even want the church at this point to depend on the state. Yeah. So, I mean, look at what happened during the last few years with so many churches taking those PPP loans. I was beside myself when churches started taking money from the government and depending upon the government to stay open. And I even said at the time, I said, mark my words, those churches that are taking money from the government are going to fall apart. And so far, everything I said was right. Those churches that took money, they're falling apart. The churches that didn't take the money, they didn't shut down. Those are the churches that are growing by leaps and bounds right now. Because people are still wanting to know the truth. They're seeking the truth. They're thirsty for the truth, and they're certainly not going to find it in a place that's depending upon the government.
Well, that's a great thing about Americans. Americans are not willing to simply be told to shut up and behave and obey us. Americans will fight back. They will look for the truth and try to figure it out. I don't know what happened here. I don't know how people became so complacent in this particular city, but they have just essentially decided to go along with the leftist ideas of the world, the feminist agenda, the sort of Marxist view of the world, this whole concept that there is no God, let's just erase religion from the society. It is absolutely detrimental. You can see the lack of ethics in this region of the world, and it's very sad to me. I mean, I look at people and I'm very sad for them because a lot of people, they just don't have any real direction in their life, and I don't know what to tell them. I mean, I can't tell them to just go to church. They're not going to listen to that, but that's really the answer. I mean, that's really what they should be doing. And in America, we could lose our soul as well. I feel like where I am right now is a kind of a soulless country, or at least a soulless city. And that can happen in America as well. If we get the wrong people in our federal government, our local governments, I think our policies could change in such a way that America could start to lose its soul as well, lose its religion. People are not going to church as much as they used to. It's actually quite sad in America as well. It's obviously not as bad as in a lot of places in the world, but I do think that, that's what being a conservative is. You're trying to conserve the value of what you have in your culture, in your country, among the people that you love and you care about. You want to preserve the greatness of America and everything that is. And I think that's absolutely intertwined with our faith in Christianity in America.
Right. You've got this story coming out about the FBI and the deep state, and this is, I know this. My audience for sure is, at least on some level, very well aware that this is happening, and I'm sure they're going to look forward to hearing your full story on your channel. But what do people do with this information? I mean, there's got to be something we do with it. There's got to be some sort of resolve, some sort of action, because we can't just hear these things, get pissed off about it, and it does tick us off, right? I mean, you hear these things going on. It's not just what is happening. So when there's injustice, we cry out for justice, but we can't just sit around and hear about it and get mad. We got to do something. What do you think we should do?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think people just have to be a little bit more involved at every level of government. The most local municipal government affects the city governments, affect the state governments, affect the federal governments. Everything that happens is like, okay, I'll give you an example. I believe that in 2024, that the Democrats will try to take Donald Trump off the ballots. I think that's what the whole incitement of insurrection accusation is all about. I think they want to take Trump off the ballots. And I think they're going to try to convince the secretaries of state in the swing states to do this. Well, I looked into it, and all the secretaries of states in all the swing states are Democrats, all except Georgia, and the Secretary of State, Brett Raffensperger in Georgia, hates Donald Trump anyway. And he's a Republican, but he hates Trump. So I do think they're going to try this. That's how I think they're going to try to manipulate the election in 2024. And that's one example of how a more local election can affect a national election and what's going on the national stage. So if you just join your school board or you become one of the legislators in your state or even in your city, you become somehow involved in your city government or your state government, you can actually have a much bigger impact than you think that you might be able to have. And there's a buddy of mine named Scott Pressler, and he just goes around and he just gets people to sign up, sign up to vote, to sign up specifically as a Republican. He just goes around the country. That's all he does. Scott Pressler, awesome guy. And he encourages people to join their local governments and try to make changes at that level. And I just think that we forget sometimes how important government is on every level, especially right now, and even if you don't have time to do that, just be informed. And like you said, your audience is very, very well informed. To me, it's quite difficult to encourage people to become informed because there are so many news outlets that just lie to people. And these are big news outlets, right? Like CNN and MSNBC and, even like the New York Times will just lie to people. And like my buddy's mom's a hard left Democrat, and she constantly says the same thing. Well, they wouldn't lie to me. They think the people on TV won't lie to them. That's a tricky thing. But, we've got to fight. We've got to try to get the word out, and we've got to be patient and kind. I think a lot of times it's very easy to look at what, our neighbor thinks, who's a Democrat, and just like, hit ourselves in the forehead and say, what, face palm, right. What are you thinking? You're such an idiot, and you feel superior to that person because you have more information. And it feels kind of fun to think, okay, I know stuff that this person doesn't. This person's an idiot. So you feel superior to them. And that's a bit of fun, but that's not going to convince them. I think we have to, like the Christian way, just love your neighbor, love your enemy, and show kindness to people who disagree with you. And I think that's maybe the best way to, convince people that maybe your way isn't so evil after all.
Right. So your story's coming out in a couple of days. How can people follow you? How can people make sure that they're up to date on all the stuff you're doing?
Well, just Mr. Reagan on YouTube. That's really the only platform that I use. I've tried to build my Twitter account, but I don't know. I don't know what's up with that. I cannot build my Twitter account, even after Elon Musk took over. But I'm Mr. Reagan USA on Twitter if you use that. If not, just check me out on YouTube at Mr. Reagan. You'll find me.
All right. Well, hey, Mr. Reagan, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate all that you are doing. Really look forward to watching that story coming out. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. A lot of stuff going on. If you like this video, please like it. Share this out with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Again, go over to rwatch.com. Subscribe there. Become a watchman so you can always be informed. We got more stuff coming up, so stay tuned. We'll see you next time right here on Our Watch with Tim Thompson.